Okay, we'll get started. Everybody, welcome to Mountain West Capital Network's Business Forum. Hope you enjoyed the wait music. It's a pretty good COVID song, get knocked down. Glad I get up again. And also glad we don't have March Madness to compete with today. Looks like most of the games are later today and tomorrow. I'm Drew Jurgensen, Chairman of Mountain West Capital Network, full-time at KeyBank. I have the honor of making a few announcements before we get into our guest speaker and our focus sponsor. First announcement is our next business forum is April 15th, 2021. I don't know why I said the year. Durham Jones, and don't throw me off, Dave, because I can hear you. You're not on mute. You're laughing at me. You're throwing me off. We haven't announced the speaker yet, but it's April 15th, so mark that date. Also, our Deal Flow event is upcoming, May 20th. We've got some really good speakers and content lined up. We have not announced those either, but you definitely do not want to miss that. I'm super excited about how that's coming together. I want to take a second to say thank you to a few people on the call today. Now CFO's stepped in to really help us organize our virtual meetings and virtual content and put a lot of effort into making sure today comes off smoothly. As you have questions in today's content, you can see Caitlin on the screen here. Please send questions to her directly in the chat. And then also want to thank David Stahl with Hillcrest Bank. They're our focus sponsor today. Helped line up Don, who will be addressing us. I had a chance to preview the content. Super excited about it. For those that want to share this with their colleagues after the call that couldn't attend, we will make a link available. It is being recorded, and we'll pass it around shortly afterwards. That's all the announcements I had. I'll turn it over to you, Dave.
Thanks, Drew. We appreciate it, and thanks to Mountain West Capital for the opportunity to host this month. And I'm really excited to introduce one of our great clients here at Hillcrest in Don Shaver and Western Botanicals. They, at Hillcrest, we are, exclusively a business, commercial, and middle market focused bank. And we're doing everything along the capital stack, as well as deposits, treasury. We're a full service bank here in Utah. While we're new to Utah, we're not new to business and banking. And so we're excited to partner with organizations like Mountain West Capital to celebrate entrepreneurs and tell the story of the businesses that are driving our economy. And through that gig, we get the opportunity to work with great entrepreneurs like Don, and we're excited to help sponsor this month and celebrate Don and his story. And hopefully, everyone here has learns a little something today, because Don, in his over 30 years of running businesses, starting businesses, exiting businesses, has got a really great story to tell. And so hopefully, we'll be seeing more from Western Botanicals and their brands alike in the future. And, without further ado, I'll turn it over to Don Shaver, CEO and owner of Western Botanicals. Don, show's yours.
Thanks, David. Coincidentally, I met David, I guess, about a year and a half ago, but turns out that he was a banker in Orlando, which is where I'm from. And we never bumped into each other back in the day, but he ran SunTrust Bank's commercial division. I can't see everybody's faces out there, but if I could see a show of hands, I'd be curious to see how many of you have ever been involved with entrepreneurship deals of your own before. And for those of you that have not, how many of you have thought about it but have not gotten involved in it just yet? Well, for those of you that have, I'm sure that you're going to be able to feel a lot of the pain that I'm going to go through on this call. Being an entrepreneur means that, as our opening song says, you get knocked down and you have to get up again. And it's something that we all do. Entrepreneurs have it, I guess, ingrained in them that they are probably not the most stable people, I'll call it. We're very passionate about what we do, but we jump into opportunities with both of our feet, and very passionate about what projects we get involved in. I'm going to walk you through today some of let me get this here a little bit. There we go. I'm going to walk you through a little bit about my background. I was a child of the 70s, and I guess for better or for worse, all that went with that. I did have long hair. I did listen to rock music. I was involved with all the things that high school kids did back then. And I really started, I guess, my entrepreneurship career early on. I was involved with a lot of, growing up in upstate New York, it was not a very high income area. So most of us kids worked for a living in the farming communities or shoveling or shoveling driveways or mowing people's yards for them. I do have one little quick sidebar that I had my first job and lost my first job in one day at the age of 12. Actually, my brother and I, we were both hired and fired the same day. We went to work for a farmer picking strawberries, and he came out about 3 hours into it, and we were covered in red. And he said we were blasting all of his profits, so we both got let go. But that's kind of a lot of kids at my age back in the early 70s had to work because our families did not have a lot to come that we came from. Fortunately for me, I did go to college and had a chance to meet my beautiful wife, who's up there in the picture. Her name's Jeanette. You know, one thing that entrepreneurs really could use is having somebody that is by their side, you know, through the thick and thin. My wife has been extremely supportive, even when she probably shouldn't have been on some of my ventures, but she always was there for me, and I'm very thankful for that. We've been together for 36 years. I also have two beautiful kids. I have a 30-year-old son that's in the financial technology industry here in Salt Lake. And then I have a 27-year-old daughter who lives in Manhattan that's in the marketing industry. Things that I like to do: golf, fish, mountain bike, and a couple of charities that I'm very much involved in. Fairways for Warriors, which is a charity that's built around our veterans and trying to prevent veteran suicide. Very important to me. And then also Edgewood Children's Ranch, which is a home in Orlando, Florida for orphan children. So a couple of the things that I get involved with on my free time. What can you expect today? I'm going to kind of walk you through, for better or for worse, a few of the businesses that I've started that I've had some luck with, and I'm going to go through some that were dogs with fleas that did not have so much luck with. I think that any real entrepreneur is going to tell you that they've had more failures than they've had successes. It's just the nature of the beast. We swing a lot of bats, and I think if I was to probably statistically feel like I think I went 4 for 14 so far in my career. I'm almost 60 years old. I'm not giving up. I still feel like I'm 30, and I still run real hard. But I would say that I was successful in my mind 4 out of 14 times, which wouldn't make me into the Baseball Hall of Fame with that batting average, but I'm comfortable with it. I'm also going to give you an assessment of the things that I think are hard lessons that I've learned along the way and some of the opportunities that presented themselves. Here's a couple of businesses that I started early on. One of them is called Flamingo Express. If you could picture Grubhub, DoorDash, Uber Eats today, imagine it was 1986, really before technology, definitely before Google Maps or Waze or any of those. And you know, at the time, I was in the restaurant industry, and I felt like there was an opportunity for restaurants that were not Chinese or pizza to have products delivered to the home. So it doesn't sound like a very novel idea today, but 35 years ago, there were no delivery of anybody else besides pizza and Chinese. So I ended up hiring a bunch of college kids in Tampa. They gave them a kind of a roadmap. Actually gave them a road atlas, because back then it was a Rand McNally road atlas you worked with. And we went on, we brought on restaurants, and then they were dialing for dollars with customers and delivering product. Great idea, just was not scalable at all. You know, one salesperson could deliver about one product an hour because they spent most of their time looking through a map online trying to figure out how to get from point A to point B. So that was early. I didn't give up though. I got involved with several businesses after that. Another one that I did not have a lot of, I had success with it, great success with it. But as I said here, you know, the old saying, if you mess with a bull, you'll get the horns. So in 2003, being in the restaurant industry, Red Bull was becoming very popular. It was being very popular as an additive to a drink. So a lot of people were drinking vodka and Red Bull at the time. And unlike any other mixed drink, where the product, the mix that you were using, like ginger ale, tonic, whatever, came off of a soda fountain, was not added to the cost of the product. It was just part of what it cost for a drink. And because Red Bull was being delivered directly to the restaurants and was being sold to the restaurants by the can, and restaurants and bars had to in turn sell Red Bull to the consumer by the can, which frustrated them that they were just looking for a mixed drink, and they were having to pay for both the alcohol and the mixer separately. So I said, what a great idea. Why don't we create a product, we'll reverse engineer Red Bull and put it on a fountain, like a soda gun, similar to Coke and Pepsi. Well, we got it into 17 states, hundreds of restaurants and bars. And I was getting a tremendous amount of calls in the middle of the night from irate restaurant and bar owners telling me that they were having this really sticky syrup all over their restaurant or their bar. And I'd have to send out texts at night, and it was not only was it a hassle, but it was very expensive. Turns out that the bull in this case was either Coke or Pepsi, depending upon who owned the gun, and a lot of the reps were sabotaging our lines, so that we were intentionally leaking. They were intentionally leaking our product all across the bar. So that, fighting that uphill battle against Coke and Pepsi was just too much, and so we ended up selling the brand. Fortunately, we got out of the business. So those were a couple of the what I'll call the failures, if I will, things that did not go as planned, and a couple of ones that did go pretty well. In 2017, I started with a partner of mine, Steve Bronstein, and we were very much, my career was pretty much almost exclusively in the consumer packaged goods industry, which could be anything from food to packaging to drinks, alcohol, et cetera. One of the concepts that we came up with at the time, and really, I think a lot of entrepreneurs feel the same way, that they're disruptors. We looked at the model for the beer business, especially in the state of Florida, where unlike many other industries, the distributor controls the market. They decide what products are going to be sold into the market. They control the margins, et cetera. It's not done by the end user or the retailer. So we went to a major retailer, Circle K, actually, which is the second largest convenience store in the world. And we sat down with them and we presented them with some data on the beer category and showed them that they had a void in 2 different products, and that we were going to create a product that was specific to them, that was a lifestyle brand. And because it was for the state of Florida, where they had 960 locations, we ended up creating a product line called Sequest that had a whole backstory behind it in terms of lifestyle with boating and fishing and beaching and that kind of thing. We were very successful with that product. We ended up selling the product to Dogfish Brewing Company back in 2017 or 18. The second one is one that I guess is, everybody's got the one thing that they could say that is their claim to fame, or they can hang their hat on. In 1992, I started a regional food service sales and marketing agency. In a lot of industries, they're known as manufacturer rep firms. Sometimes they call them sales and marketing agencies. Sometimes they call them brokers. But virtually every industry has this methodology to go to market. Any major manufacturer in any industry has the opportunity to either have their own direct sales organization, or they can work through a network like a sales and marketing agency. At the time, I was 30 years old. I was working for Sara Lee Bakery Company, and my job was to manage a broker network in Florida and the Caribbean. So I had essentially 50 salespeople between Florida and the Caribbean that were responsible for developing our business for Sara Lee. And me, like every other manufacturer in the industry, felt like when we were in the market working with the salespeople, they were giving us their undivided attention and we were being very successful. The question at the time, back in the early 90s, when you weren't in the market, how did you know if they were putting any effort against your product or not? So there was no accountability. So I came up with an idea back in 92, which was significantly before Salesforce.com or HubSpot or any of these other companies that have a CRM, and we created a CRM of our own. I basically drew out the data that I was looking for, and I found a really super smart guy that helped me put together a customizable database that would show the supplier community, which people that we called on, what the products that we showed them, who the competition was, what the pricing was, what the success or failure of the lead was. And lo and behold, through doing that, the major suppliers in the industry all had the same obstacles for them, not having the accountability, so they started flooding to us. And as they came to us, it was companies like Ocean Spray, Tabasco, Tyson, all the major brands in the food industry. So as we expanded from a small office in Orlando, either through real internal growth or through fold outs, we opened offices in Miami, Tampa, Jacksonville, Atlanta, North Carolina, South Carolina. And we grew our network to where we had 180 dedicated direct salespeople. And all of our salespeople were salaried. So it was a pretty heavy load in terms of the size of our organization. And we ended up selling the company in 2013 to the largest company in our industry, Acosta Sales and Marketing. And at the time, we had taken our sales up to just over $1 billion. And we had gotten into some other areas besides food as well. We were into disposables and supplies, et cetera. But that was kind of the apex. And so after that occurred, go this way. After that occurred, I had to decide what I was going to do. It was 2013. I had a 5-year non-compete with Acosta, so I couldn't really get back into the sales and marketing side of the industry. So I started consulting companies, everything from multi-generational companies that needed reorganization or needed an M&A strategy to marketing and developing sales organizations, et cetera. But one of the companies I was working with was actually involved in the supplement space. And the supplement space for me was always interesting. I grew up in a family of chiropractors, and we were very health conscious growing up, very nutritional based and self-healing. So this was something that, I can still remember when I was 3 years old that my dad was a chiropractor, and on weekends I'd sit in his office while he was unloading all the nutritional supplements that would come in during the week, and he'd put them on a shelf so that he could sell them to his customers that were. So we started taking dissolvable vitamin C's at 3 years old. So it wasn't foreign to me. So as we started looking at getting into it, I decided I was going to look nationwide, not really put any boundaries in terms of what I was looking for, but I created a thesis. And as an entrepreneur, it's something that most of us do, which is we try to identify what it is that we want. We identify an industry we want to get into. And then once we start looking for companies, for me, it was all about people, places, and things. And as I went to 10 different locations around the country, I got to see in the supplement industry, the good and the bad, and definitely the ugly. Our industry that I'm in now, the supplement industry, is a great industry, great people. It's just a little bit underdeveloped. It's not up to the level that most of the consumer packaged goods, other companies like the foods and the beverages are. But we ended up settling on a company called Western Botanicals. Western Botanicals is a 25-year-old supplement company located down in Spanish Fork. It was founded by a gentleman that was in Sacramento. He wanted to be closer to his faith and his family here in Utah. And after 7 years of being in Sacramento, he told all his employees, we're moving east. And they ended up packing up, I think, 4 tractor trailer loads of family belongings, their equipment, and they moved over and opened up the business in Spanish Fork. They had a great run. What I liked about the place was it was extremely clean, high quality, but really it was about the people. It had fantastic employees. The gentleman that was running the organization was 38 years old. He'd been with the owner for 18 years. He knew everything there was to know about manufacturing herbal supplements, both in capsule form as well as tinctures. And as I got to understand him and some of the other fellow employees, I just felt a sense of character and commitment that it was a sense of belonging. It seemed like a perfect opportunity. And the third piece of it, of the equation, was I wanted to make sure that it was a facility that had a lot of capacity. And because this company, ironically, never had a sales or a marketing person in 25 years, they were operating at about 15% capacity, but very profitable and doing quite well. So we acquired the company in January of 2020. And, things you just can't prepare for, but you just have to be resilient and work through. In 2020, as the previous slide said, perfect timing is everything. And I thought getting into this industry just at the beginning of the pandemic and was very fortuitous for us. But what it didn't really, what didn't help us was the fact that because this industry grew at such a rate that it did during COVID, there was a major supply chain issue. Getting packaging out of China was, and still is, somewhat next to impossible. Most of the herbs that are grown in this industry, the farmers that have grown them based on previous historical supply needs. And supply needs went up exponentially this year. So finding products to bottle has been a challenge for the first 6 months. We've worked through that. From a sales and marketing standpoint, we looked at our website, and you can look at it today, and please do, because I'd like you to look at it a month from now and see how it's different. But westernbotanicals.com was kind of a mishmash of direct-to-consumer as well as B2B. So the company itself does about 95% of its business in B2B through co-manufacturing for other people. Yet when you go to the Western Botanicals site, you have to dig to find that, even though it's 95% of the business. And so we felt like that we needed to bifurcate the job based into the segments that we were selling into. So we opened up another website called WB Blends, which is specific to our co-manufacturing business. In addition to that, from the beginning, we felt like there was an opportunity to create a lifestyle brand. There's a lot of products out there that kind of look a lot like, if you look to the right, the Randy's First herbal colon formula bottle, that seem very, I call it granola crunchy, but things in our industry seem either that or they seem very pharmaceutical. And we wanted to create something that was more lifestyle oriented that would, at the time, again, before COVID, that would, we felt that would get the younger generations into taking supplements for their own health in a preventative way. So we worked with an agency out of New York to create Amply Blends. And if you go to that site, you can see that we have a 13 SKU product offering through that. Also, while this was going on, we decided to take Western Botanicals and we reviewed the branding of that. And as you can see, the branding on the left was the previous one. And it was essentially, I don't know if you can see it well enough, but it's a farmer standing behind a horse drawn plow. And it's actually, I've seen, it's a very famous image here locally in Utah, and it's called Springtime. But we took that, we felt we needed to modernize it so that we could sell it both domestically and internationally. And so we've rebranded it as Western Botanicals, as you see on the right-hand side. What I will say is that through all this, we had a few other hurdles that we didn't expect. I think this is typical for most entrepreneurs. You go in with the best intentions, but we bought the company in January. We had the earthquake, which affected our supply chain. I think it was February. We had a fire in our facility in March, and then we had COVID really kick in March. So it was, it wasn't what we anticipated getting into it. You go into it with rose-colored glasses, and then you actually get to see what you've actually bought into. And really, that's a great company, and because of that, I think we've been very resilient and done very well. But right now, we're tracking about 4x in terms of production from where we were. In the beginning, the company was operating 4 days a week in the manufacturing side, and now we're one shift a day, and now we're doing 2 shifts a day, 6 days a week, and looking for our next facility, actually, with the help of David. Okay, if I knew then what I know now, the first thing I would say is take a look in the mirror and really do a self-assessment and ask yourself, am I up for this challenge of owning my own business? Because unlike other jobs where you are a free agent, to use a sports analogy, and if things aren't going your way, you're welcome to relocate into another facility or another company or another geography. But once you put both feet into the entrepreneurship business, you have to be there for the duration. And the duration may mean that there are times when you're not successful and you wish you were doing something else, both physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually, financially, but you've got the bed that you've made and you've got to lay in it and find your way. If things don't go well, then there are times when you have to find a way to exit them. But just to kind of go through some of these points up here, because you may not know what I'm referring to. As I said, looking in the mirror is really just doing a self-assessment to see if you're up for the challenge, and it is a challenge. Make sure you fully vet all your opportunities. I can't tell you the number of times that I've looked at businesses and I said, this is the one, this is perfect. It reminds me when you had that first girlfriend in high school and you said, this is a girl I'm going to marry one day. And then sooner or later you found out, like the business, they all have warts, right? That nothing's perfect. And you just have to really take the opportunity to really vet the opportunity out before you make the investment into it. Next thing I think that I fall victim to, but I'm very proud of, is that when I do get involved with something, I care more than other people think is wise. And what I mean by that is you're going to hear a lot of naysayers tell you why it's not a great idea that you should get involved with it, that you shouldn't take the risk, that you've got a great opportunity where you are today. Why make the change? And if you have a conviction to it and you care more than other people, then you have a much higher chance of success. Another part is exposing your passion. I think anybody that knows me on a personal level knows that for better or for worse, I'm a super passionate guy. On everything, be it my hobbies, be it unfortunately, my politics, on pretty much everything I've got an opinion on. And, I think that it's inspirational for some people, but, for others it's not. But for the people that, especially the people with friends, family, potential future partners, employees, investors, when they really feel that you're passionate about what you're getting involved in, they want to be part of it, even if it's living, vicariously through you and not being part of the deal. They still want to hear about your successes and about the challenges that you have. Then another thing, great coaches build great teams. I've been very fortunate. I've got partners. Scott Matukis is one of them, who's my COO and my partner. That he's a great example of somebody that, when I say great coaches build great teams, we have gone out and the two of us have found people that have fit into our puzzle perfectly in terms of how their complementary skill sets are. But most importantly, we have some things that we won't go back on. And one of them is that they have to have a similar character to us. They got to have the same ethics and values as us. And if they do, and they may not be that perfect person for the position, we would bring those people in before we would bring in just an all-star. You can go back into history and sports and see lots of teams that had lots of money, that spent all their money. George Steinbrenner with the Yankees, great example I can think of, that went out and bought the most expensive athletes there were, but they were individual athletes who were concerned about their own personal statistics and not necessarily first and foremost about the success of the organization. I think if you can build an organization with the common cause in mind and everybody buys into it, there's a much greater chance that your culture is going to help you succeed. Next one is cash is king. You've got to have a realistic view of what it's going to cost for you to get into business and what it's going to cost for you to maintain your business. And whatever you think it is, and you can multiply it exponentially by about 10, because you won't think, there's no way that you can predict everything that's going to cost you. I will say though that as an interesting side story, one of the companies I was consulting happened to be in Silicon Valley in the food industry, which is kind of unique in itself. But this company has been around for 10 years. It's had over $100 million invested in it, and it's never made a penny. And that doesn't happen in consumer packaged goods. That's a complete one-off. In our industry, you have to be, you're accountable for your actions, and you have to be successful, or else you won't sustain. Next one is buckle up. As I said, planes, trains, automobiles, fires, earthquakes, pandemics, things are going to happen to you. And you can't just crawl back in bed in the morning and say tomorrow's going to be another day. You just have to power through it, and you have to persevere. And that's something, again, going back to the first point, look in the mirror and see if you're up for that challenge. Finally, know when to hold them and know when to fold them. And this is a personal story. And my son, who was a senior in the entrepreneurship program 10 years ago at Florida State University, came up with an incredible idea. He, like me, was very passionate about fishing, and we've both been fishing in a lot of charter situations. And when you fish out for, in the ocean, and you catch that once in a lifetime fish, the captain will often try to convince you to have that fish mounted. And when you mount a fish, it not only does it take about 6 months, but it also costs, they charge you by the inch. So it's pretty expensive. It could be $1,000 to have a fish mounted. So my son Dylan came up with this great idea. He said, "Dad, why don't we create a software app?" And again, 10 years ago, apps were definitely around, but there weren't that many of them. Specifically, there were none in the fishing industry. But he said, "Why don't we create an app that the fishing captains can take a picture of their client with the fish, and then we can print what was called a fathead." If you've ever seen those, it's a vinyl picture that you hang on the wall. It was started for the people in the sports industry, where when you're a 13-year-old kid, there was nothing like having a LeBron James up on the wall if you're a basketball player in your bedroom, life-size picture. So he came up with this idea that we would pay the way we would scale is we would pay the fishing captains a commission on each of those prints that they pushed through to us. And we went out there and created the app, beat the streets, got all these fishing guides lined up. And then what happened was two things that we should have probably been able to see a little bit in the future. And one of them is that these darn cameras have got their phones have got such great cameras today that people are taking their own pictures and they're taking their own selfies, and they don't need a fishing captain to take a picture of them and charge them for it. And secondly, I think that pictures hanging on the wall have become obsolete. So the hardest thing for me was to sit down with my son and say, okay, we gave it everything we had, but now it's time to unwind. And I had to help him understand that as an entrepreneur, you can't take these things, as hard as it may sound, you can't take them personally forever. You can take them personally, but you got to get over it and get through it, or else you'll never become an entrepreneur again because you'll be afraid to fail. You can't be afraid to fail as an entrepreneur. You have to You have to expect that it's going to happen at some point if you do it enough times. But just as my good friend Ron from Parks and Rec says, you just can't regret. You can't have any regrets. The last thing I want to talk about is something that's kind of near and dear to me. If it wasn't for David bugging me several times, I probably wouldn't be sitting here, because I don't relish the opportunity to get up and talk about myself. And there's two women psychologists back in the mid 80s that came up with this idea or this concept called imposter syndrome. Imposter syndrome is when you feel like you're not for real, that anything that's come to you has come to you because you've been fortunate, you've had good luck, timing was good, but you just don't, you have this feeling of self-doubt. And I can say to this, if I could see everybody's face out there, and if you're all raising your hand and ask you if you've ever had feelings of self-doubt before, I think, if we were all honest, we would all say we all have. But when you get these feelings, it's really great to be able to reach out to somebody else and have them help you work through those thoughts. I read a book about 10 years ago from Mitch Albom called The 5 People You Meet in Heaven. Mitch was a sports writer in Boston, and he's written some incredible books like Tuesdays with Morrie. I don't know if you've had a chance to read that, but in 5 People You Meet in Heaven, he talks about 5 people that you'll meet sometime during your life, and maybe a brushing pass by, and maybe somebody you had a lifelong relationship with, but 5 people will make an indelible impression on who you are and what your character is and what you stand for. And if you reach out and seek mentors, then they can help you through whatever these issues are that you're going to find. And then again, remember that your IP, your personal IP, people, when they think about IP, they're thinking about typically technology or software. We all have our own IP. We've all had our own personal experiences. If it was me, getting fired for throwing strawberries when I was 12 years old to, I wasn't the best student in the world. I ended up going to West Point, and they asked me after 3 semesters to go find another college because I wasn't performing academically. But you get knocked down, you find a way to get back up. But these are all part of the experiences in life that help you create the person that you are. And it makes you unique and invaluable. So being that you're unique and invaluable, you do have something to offer. You may not be, I could promise you this, there's a lot of people that know a lot more about the silkman trade than I do, but I have a very strong feeling that with the people that I've surrounded myself with, we're going to be more successful than most. So your IP, my IP in my own situation today is my ability to I think, convey a feeling of passion, to build a team, and to create a culture that everybody wants to work together. So your IP may or may not be specific to what you do for a living, but it's built on the character of the person that you are. And then finally, just measure your self-worth by who you are at your core, not by your accomplishments, not by your colleagues or your possessions. It's really, what you stand for. It's the character that you are, the ethics you have, the values that you have, what your long-term lot in life is. For me personally, I feel like, I'll be 60 next month. So I feel like I've earned the right to give my opinion to people when they ask for it. And I don't feel like an imposter when it comes to things like that. For better or for worse, I've been through a lot in, 40 years of business. And I'm happy to help anybody. If this resonates with anybody on the call and they feel a little bit stuck at where they are, or they'd like somebody to talk to, I welcome you to reach out to me, and whether it's personal or professional, I feel like where I am in life is I want to help people. So, again, feel free to reach out. And finally, I just want to say thanks to Kat Roth, who's my director of marketing, who really helped me define what this is. When you go through this process, you do a lot of introspective work, and I think it's great for all of us to do it. I got forced into it. For me, it's like, I probably would have never done this if it wasn't for the fact that David asked me to talk to the group. But it did help me reflect on the things that I did well, the things that I didn't do so well, the relationships that I had in life. The fact
That'd be a good place to start. I mean, just to kind of open up, one of the questions we've received was, talk a little bit more, if you can, about how being an entrepreneur has affected your personal life. Like how have you been able to separate it? I know you're a big family man, and so maybe tell us a little bit about how you've been able to kind of balance both and yet be successful in both.
It's a good question, and it's I really believe it's an impossible task. Anybody can tell you that they figured it out. It's very difficult to figure out. There were days, a lot of days that I'd go in at 6 o'clock in the morning. At 7:30 at night, I'd have a dinner. I'd go straight from work to a dinner. I'd get home at 11:30, 12 o'clock at night, and I was back at 6, and I didn't see my kids all night long. But I always made every attempt and effort to do whatever I could to be with them and to spend time with them. And again, I got to go back to my wife. And if you don't have a partner that is supportive of it, it's going to be a super bumpy road. You've got to have somebody that takes care of all the personal things when you're taking care of the business side and understands the risk involved and has enough faith and trust in you that you're going to help them weather the storm, and they're going to be with you no matter what, because they know that, I live for my family, and my personal success is counting on them supporting me, and their success in their future is counting on me being able to provide. So it's kind of a congruous relationship.
Sure, thanks for that. So question here, you mentioned with one of the companies, you fixed the sales function of sort of the industry. Can you elaborate a little bit more on how you did that, and maybe take the listeners through a little bit of the process that, as you're introducing a new product, a disruptive technology into an industry?
Yeah, I'm not sure which one they were referring to, but one thing I would say is from the Western Botanical standpoint, it might have been that where it wasn't hard to fix it. They didn't have a sales process, really. It was all word of mouth. But what we had done, the company was very profitable when we bought it, and we basically reinvested every penny of the profits that they were making back into the infrastructure of the company so that it would grow. I brought in Kat to run our marketing department. I brought in Steve, who's the head of our sales and marketing, is an ex-Pepsi VP. I brought in somebody that's Scott, who's the COO. I brought in finance people. And then under the sales side, I brought in a VP of sales that handles all of our onboarding, as well as a BDR that's out there doing most of the canvassing. Something has changed for all of us, I can say, from a sales standpoint in the last 12 months. The methodology to go to market for the past decades, up until March of last year, there was a lot of value in your own personal IP when it came to your knowledge and your industry contacts. And when COVID hit and people started staying home and not working from their office any longer, not being able to take appointments, then it really caused us all to kind of sit back and think, how can we do this differently? And really, without LinkedIn, I'm not sure where any of us would be today in the sales process without LinkedIn and having the opportunity to connect with people that way. And the one thing about LinkedIn that really hurt old timers like myself is it allowed companies to hire recent college grads that had no industry experience, give them a platform to work off of, give them the data in terms of who to contact, a script on what to say, and really the buyer at the other end really had no way to differentiate between Don Shaver, who's been around for 40 years, and really when my value was being able to sit in front of a customer and being able to pivot on the spot when we were asking questions and probing and trying to find out what it is that their pinch points are and what their opportunities are, is being able to think based on past experiences how I would handle that situation. And now with COVID, really you try to find something clever to say, through a LinkedIn message to get an appointment to hopefully one day have a Zoom call where you can have a virtual meeting. But it's definitely changed. And for us, bringing in a really great BDR, good VP of sales, great marketing people, it's really helped elevate our game as a company.
By the way, it's amazing how business vernacular has changed over the last 12 months. Never did I think we'd be saying LinkedIn and Zoom. And, we had a meeting at our office on Monday where we had two video conferencing platforms going at the same time. We were doing a WebEx meeting inside of Teams. Mm-hmm. The agility that you have to display in this COVID environment is even post-pandemic is kind of amazing. Hey, just as a reminder, we got a few more questions coming in, but if you have any questions for Don, please send them to Caitlin, and we'll make sure we get them up. We'll get them asked. But hey, so this is one I know you and I spent a lot of time talking about, but this is your first business in Utah. How has the business environment been for you? What about the quality of employees, managers, et cetera? Talk a little bit about how that investment in Utah has been, and what have been your observations?
Okay, so good question. So I started coming to Utah when I sold my company in 2013 for summer vacation, and being in Florida, the first thing you want to do in the summer is get out of Florida. It's hot, it's mosquito infested, and it's extremely humid. So I started coming out here and really fell in love with the mountains and the lifestyle and everything that everybody else does. But as I was looking for a business to buy and a market to buy in, I've been pretty much involved with probably 49 out of 50 states, having businesses that I've been through plants and worked with companies, et cetera. And what I found about the people in Utah is that I love them. They're super genuine people. They're very honest. Not like in the further west you go, but here in Utah, the people are they're friendly, they're hardworking, they're honest. They seem genuinely like they want to see you succeed. And I thought it was super refreshing compared to some of the other markets I've been involved in.
Good. Hey, so another question here. You mentioned opening a new facility. Can you talk a little bit about what kind of thinking and planning goes into that kind of strategy, and why not maybe expand or focus on being more efficient with the current plant?
Another good question. And I would say the quick answer is we're landlocked and we've outgrown it. The other answer to that question is that we're growing so fast because of the infrastructure spends that we've made and the people that we have and the relationships and the knowledge, and that it's given us the opportunity that we really feel like in order to take this thing to the next level, there's some product categories that we want to get involved in that we're not currently involved in, that our customers that we have currently have opened up to us and then told us, hey, if you guys can start manufacturing in these different capacities, then we'd be happy to move our business your way. So it's a lot of it's timing. I think that we started having this conversation 6 months ago, and we're probably 6 months away before it's going to occur. But somebody's got to have the vision to lead down the road and not just what goes on day to day. I'm fortunate I got great people like Scott and Steve that are and James that are in the trenches day in and day out, putting out fires, taking care of all the opportunities as they arise. But for me, my role is more about how do we plan for the future, and that's where we're starting to build on the idea about moving facilities.
Yeah. Another question here. As you put an emphasis on hiring talent with high character, what are some effective ways you judge that in the recruiting process?
Another good one. There's so many different psychological evaluations you can do out there. I will say that both Scott is very entrepreneurial as well. I think that entrepreneurs do a lot of things that are not traditional in a typical corporate hiring world. We put people in positions when we're having conversations with them that would kind of draw out what their character traits are. And we've been pretty successful hiring based on our gut reaction to that. Entrepreneurs do a lot of things based on gut and not based on their brains. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. But I will say for me, if I had one strength, it would be the ability to find the people that do have these character traits and bring them along with you.
Great. I think maybe just our last question, if there's no others coming in, is really talk about, I know you've talked about family and faith and helping people, but if you had to zero in on one thing that motivates you, and then how would you define success on the backside of that?
That's hard to do. I would say the one thing that motivates me is what my end game is. I feel very blessed that God's given us the opportunities that he has, and the fruits of our labor. And I recognize that there's a responsibility that comes with that, and it's giving back. It's giving back in a lot of different ways. And there's a good book that was written by a guy named Bob Burford, and I read it when I was 40, I think. It was called Halftime. And it talks about how the first half of your life, you're gaining knowledge and you're accumulating, and you're a hunter and you're a gatherer, right? And the second half of your life, you become more of I don't know if I'd use the word shaman, but you're somebody that people look up to as a mentor and as the elder of the community, and you're giving back that way, but also giving back to help socially to different causes. I brought up two of them that I really believe in and I fully support: Fairways for Warriors, and then also Edgewood Children's Ranch. But I think all of us have a social obligation to get involved at some level when we can. It's really hard when you're young and you have a young family and young kids and a new career. But as we get older, that's what drives me. Is I feel like the more successful that we can be, the more that I have to share with others down the road.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. Hey, we've had a couple more come in, and just a quick time check, maybe with Sherry or Caitlin. How are we doing? Do we have a couple more minutes?
Yep, we are good. We have a couple more minutes for some questions.
Fantastic. So what were your must-haves or must-be's when you were looking to acquire a company?
As I mentioned before, as a thesis, my thesis is always the same. It's people, places, and things. And once I've identified what I think is an industry that has an upside to it, I try to find one that we could be disruptive in by taking, a different approach to how we go to market. And it's the people within the company. I looked at a lot of companies that were very profitable. They were essentially, it was the founder and a bunch of day workers. And, obviously, when you get involved with a company like that and the founders are trying to exit it, it doesn't leave you with much, even if there is business there. So people is critical to me. Our intentions are to have multiple locations around the country. So I wanted to have people that, I could, operate with a long leash theory. I always believe that when you're bringing people on board, it starts with a short leash, so you get to know each other better, kind of like if you're training your puppy. But as they become independent and you can trust them, you lengthen the leash. So if you can find people that start out with a long leash and allows you to focus on other things, I have. So, people side of it, places. I can't say enough about Utah as a business environment. Besides Florida and maybe Texas, there's no better place that you could possibly operate a business, from the tax standards, but also the value in terms of what your labor costs are, et cetera, versus what they would be in other markets. I can't imagine why anybody would open up a business in New York or California. I've had opportunities to buy companies in those states. I would never do it. It's so cost prohibitive on so many different levels. So places being the second one, and then things, having a facility that was a diamond in the rough was a big thing for me. Having one that, David, you've been in it. It's pretty outstanding what Randy developed over time. It's not the biggest. It's about 27,000 square feet. There's a lot bigger ones out there, but he thought of everything. This guy he was a tinkerer, and he just has a facility that I would put up against anybody else, in scale, size to size.
Other than dock high loading, right?
Yes, that is something I missed.
Just a couple more here in the last few minutes. So does the nutrition industry, supplement industry ever start to look like the pharmaceutical industry in the US? What's your perspective on that?
Again, I'm fairly new to it, so I don't think I'm the best judge of this, but my perception is that it's going to look more like an OTC business, over the counter business. So it's going to be more in lines with the Bayers of the world. In fact, Bayer bought a company about 6 months ago for just about $220 million. It was a 4-year-old herbal supplement company. So I see it going more that way. Our industry is, obviously, we're being stiff-armed by the FDA day in and day out, and really that comes from the lobbying efforts of the pharmaceutical companies that are out there that see us. We're in the prevention business. We're not in the repair business. We're in the prevention business. So, consequently, if people start taking care of their own immunity and their own personal health, then there's going to be less needs for the pharma on the backside. So there's always going to be that rub there. I don't see, at least in my lifetime, where herbal supplements are going to be considered in the same level as pharmaceuticals by the FDA. But I do think that having companies like Bayer get involved from an over-the-counter standpoint will make a difference.
And last question, role models. Who have been your role models, and or any mentors maybe that you'd like to highlight?
I've got several. I would say, I've a couple of employees that I've had in the past that I would actually go to them, and they're older fellows that have been around longer, that I would sit and really, they were both very open and candid with me, and took me to task when I didn't do things the proper way, and kept me honest. So I think from a business standpoint, I think from a more spiritual standpoint, a guy that's one of my best friends is our pastor, and he and I, we became friends on a personal level. Just a quick side story. So we were new to the church in Orlando, and he was standing up there in the pulpit one day talking about how they were doing this expansion at the church, and that he and his wife were going to go to Paris that summer, but they decided, they prayed out, they decided they were going to give the money back to the church and let them use it for that they'll go one day. He wasn't saying that in a way to become self-serving, but he was just making a comment. So at the time, when I was with Sarah Lee, I had probably 1 million miles with Marriott and Delta. So I said to my wife, I said, those guys seem like really nice people. Why don't we confidentially give them passes to go to Europe? Just don't let them know who it came from, because God forbid, I don't want the pastor to know who I am. Because I was like, when I grew up, it was like, that wasn't a good thing. So one
Sit
day
in the back, nobody's
Yeah.
in the front row. Yes, got it.
don't see me, right?
Yes.
So I had never met the guy personally. One day I get a phone call. He goes, "Hey, Don." I go, "Yeah." He goes, "Pastor Bill." And I, completely was reeling. I was like, "Yes, sir." He goes, "I hear we're going to Paris." I was like, "Oh my gosh, I'm going to Paris with my pastor." That's, first of all, does he like to drink wine? That's a question I needed to know. But at any rate, so, long story short is that we went as couples to Paris together, became best of friends. And he's somebody that I can have very in-depth conversations, and he's been very, very instrumental in terms of my development along the way. And the other person I'm going to mention, not because he's sitting on this call, but I've learned an awful lot from my kid. My son is very, we call him Sonny D because he's such a positive person and so inspirational. But he's been, a lot of times when I become, and I think a lot of us older people get this way, but we occasionally get into this negativity mode where, you start pointing out things that are not right instead of things that are. And, he always kind of corrects me and brings me back in, but he does it in a nice way that doesn't seem like it's conflicting. And he sneaks around getting it done, but he's been very, very instrumental in helping me. And then finally, my wife, she's definitely the level playing field in our house. I'm up and down, and she keeps me stable. So those are the people I mentioned.
No, that's great. Hey, before we turn it back over to Drew and Sherry to wrap us up, I'd also be remiss if I didn't thank Squire and Ray Chipman over in the back here. I mean, you can't see him; he's off camera, but he's our behind the scenes technology guy that's trying to put it all together. But we appreciate the use of the room here and the technology, and thank you, Don, for sharing a little bit of knowledge and your experience, and we appreciate your relationship. And anything more, we look forward to growing with you. And so with that, I'll turn it back to Drew and Sherry.
Thanks, guys.
Sherry, do you want to say anything, or do you want me to?
No,
goes like this.
Go ahead. You got it.
I got it. Don, thank you so much. David, thank you so much. That was so good. Even seeing it twice, because we did a rehearsal before this, so good. And Don, we get a chance to see a lot of entrepreneurs and owners in these forums and throughout Utah, and a lot of the times they don't spend as much time emphasizing the things that you did around family and character and people, and kind of more the I wouldn't even say softer side, but just more of that side that's outside of strategy that really matters in business. And so I really appreciate that. I love the comments around your son just recently, and that kind of humility around going through it together with your family. Really like the lesson around measuring who you are at the core. Really refreshing. Love it. Glad to hear that you brought your family and your talents here to our state. And thanks for enlightening us. I'm a little scared about ever doing an interview with you when you answer that question about how you judge character. I just picture the room like being filled with water and then just trying to see what person does in that situation. But again, thank you very much. I'll just close with the reminders on our next events. April 15th is our next business forum. Look for an announcement on that. And then please circle May 20th for deal flow. Thanks again, Hillcrest. Thanks, Don. Thanks, now CFO. Thanks, Squire. Thanks, everybody. Let's have a good week. See ya.
See you guys.
Can you reach over there?
I think we're leaving.
Yep. All good.
Um,
Bye, Sherry.
Yeah. Okay. When Sherry